and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton. And today we're going to talk about some proposals to update the downtown master plan. My guest is Allison Alexander. Welcome.
Good morning.
This is a project that you worked on when you were in planning and you have kept as you move to your new position in placemaking. It feels like, okay, some people will say the City of Hampton spends all this time planning and doesn't actually do anything. And I think that's not true. But I think our master plan progress has slowed a lot and changed a lot when the recession hit a few years ago. And we have had to recalibrate about what can economically be done and a new timetable, right?
So we are updating the downtown master plan. The city has 6 master plan areas, and they were all done in, I'd say, the 2004 to 2007 time range. Phoebus was updated a few years ago, and now we just updated Coliseum Central, and now we're updating the downtown master plan.
Yeah, and since that time, like Phoebus had to be updated because the Fort Monroe closure wasn't in the original. And then Coliseum, the earlier one, led to the development of Peninsula Town Center, and then we had to look at what happens next. And so downtown, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Right. No, that's fine. Plans are updated after many years to take into account the changing environment, the changing world, and changing economies. So we are updating the downtown master plan, and it is a targeted update, so not everything is being scrapped. There are many things in there that are still relevant. And I would say the sort of footprint that we're looking at is expanding. There were things that weren't taken into consideration that we're going back and looking at. And that's really the Harbor Square area, which it was previously an apartment complex downtown, which was purchased by the Housing Authority and has been demolished and is ready for redevelopment. And then there's the Brights Creek area, which is an industrial area just south of I-64, kind of the northern area of downtown, which wasn't included, and it's been kind of given a more detailed look at as well. And then the waterfront, downtown, the southern area of King Street, kind of that heart of downtown, the original beginnings of Hampton, has been given a closer look at as well. Fresh look at.
Well, let's take each one of those kind of one at a time and start with Harbor Square. And I know it was controversial when council bought that. It was hugely favored by the Downtown Business Association because it was a apartment complex with some problems, with some crime, with some real challenges. And it wasn't really listed in that master plan because it was privately owned. At the time, the owner had no intention of selling. It's hard for the city to envision or impose another use when you've got a private owner who isn't really into that. And so when the city bought it, it opened up a lot of opportunities. So what do we envision for that area? And by we, I want to make it very clear that this is a public process and that you talk to businesses and residents and all kinds of folks to come up with this. This is not Allison Alexander planning city staff's ideas.
Right. As we're going through the master planning process, we have worked with the Downtown Hampton Development Partnership, local faith-based institutions, neighborhood organizations. You're right, very many people, also property owners, that if we recommend something on private property, we first work with those property owners. And specifically for Harbor Square, people may be aware that a new courthouse was just built on a chunk of that land, and there are about 14 remaining acres, and it is primarily multifamily residential that's recommended for that, with about 25 to 30,000 square feet of commercial. So that's recommended at the northwest corner of the property. So that'd be at the corner of Armistead and Pembroke, where commercial is recommended for that.
Which makes sense. That's a pretty, there's housing on one side, I think, but it's mostly a very commercial.
It's a fairly high traffic intersection. But there are 2 proposals recommended, a lower density and a higher density one. So one lower density one would not require a parking structure, and a higher density one would require a parking structure to accommodate the amount of people that would be proposed to live there. And that would really be determined by market forces.
See, that's what I was going to say. So why is there more than one? Why doesn't the city just get to say, this is what we want?
it really would be determined by whoever comes in and makes a proposal to build it and what they can accommodate. But because it is owned by the housing authority, there is would be some determination as they go to sell it that the city can have some input.
So, and this is, I think, hard for people to understand why we acquire land, but we don't acquire land to make a profit when we sell it, because the private market would do that just fine. We acquire land to help control what goes there, to have an influence on what happens with it, and that influence comes from, as I said, the residents and the businesses. It's not what city staff wants necessarily, it's what all of us in the community think is the long-term good, the best use to help downtown grow, to help Hampton grow. So how do we, what will happen next there?
So this plan is on a timeline to go to the Planning Commission in April 20th for Planning Commission, a Planning Commission recommendation for adoption, and then we'll go to City Council in June for the City Council recommendation for adoption, we hope. And then the recommendations in the plan will be finalized, and at that time, city staff, especially economic development, in the downtown Hampton partnership, different entities will be able to use the plan to talk to any interested developers to say, this is what the city wants. This is, our plan going forward. This is what we would like to see here. We can kind of use it to sell our downtown
and it
to
gives
show what we want. It's our roadmap for the future.
Yeah, developers understand what they can propose or should propose if they want to come in here. All right, well, let's talk about Brights Creek, and you're going to have to define this because
Sure.
it's something the city has only recently been talking about, I think.
Sure. Brights Creek, as I mentioned, is the more industrial area, kind of south of 64, but the northern area of downtown. In the plan, it is south of 64, east of Armistead, north of Pembroke. Hopefully everyone listening is quite familiar with the map.
Geographic. Okay, so if you're driving
yes.
down the interstate, if you're going toward Norfolk from,
And you
Newport
look
News
to
or
the
Williamsburg,
right,
and you
it's
look
kind
to
of-
the right, yes, that's
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
And
There
it
it is,
used to
towards
be
downtown. That's it.
It's always been a very industrial. I mean, I remember when it was a giant stinking pile of crab shells being burned, but now I think it's more sand cement plant. I mean, but it's not necessarily the most attractive view of Hampton for interstate frontage, and interstate frontage is where a lot of businesses might choose to be.
Right. So to start right there, just south of the interstate, that portion of the plan does recommend it be reserved for office and kind of office park. So someone that may want to locate in Hampton be able to have interstate frontage and also interstate access.
Right, because part of this is there's not a direct route from
the interstate
to downtown.
There is a very long-range recommendation in the plan for an interstate interchange at King Street and I-64.
But even if that doesn't happen, we're looking at cutting a road through to make it a little easier.
Shorter-term recommendation for a road at an access road from the Armistead kind of riprap interchange across to King Street.
And the city has acquired some land in that area. Some of it's still in private
privately.
hands, so it would be a cooperative effort how it would get redeveloped.
And then Brights Creek, there is actually a creek there. It's not a really beautiful amenity right now, but part of the proposal is to make that more of an amenity for the area, start making a connected green way through the downtown. And then kind of south of where that would be more residential units in the downtown, kind of connecting, making that just north of Pembroke, so that kind of leads back into the residential that's proposed for the Harbor Square area.
Okay. Let's talk about the waterfront area, because I think people have envisioned really different things for that area. And it's hard, that's probably the hardest area, I think, where you had to bring some ideas and proposals together and figure out which one might win.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say might win. Hopefully,
Coalesce around the one. How about
hopefully everyone wins. It's very important to, I would say, the city and very many citizens that there be a public waterfront, and that the public and visitors be able to access the waterfront. We do have the waterfront walkway, and there is a proposed extension of the waterfront walkway in the plan.
I don't know that people know there's a walkway now, to be honest.
I know it's a little bit hidden.
Yeah, all the way
probably
from
use some
Air and
signage.
Space back around to Mill Point.
That's true. It's good to plug in for the waterfront walkway. The carousel is proposed to remain as is at Carousel Park. And should Amory ever choose to relocate, there is a proposal for there to be a market-type building in that location. But in the meantime, the city is in support of the seafood industry remaining as the working waterfront, remaining as long as it would like to remain. So that's really Hampton's.
I think that is
history.
It is. You know, we were crab town, and the seafood industry built Hampton from the days when the Native Americans lived here, rebuilt us after the Civil War. We were a trading port in colonial days. I mean, it is a key feature of Hampton, and it's not as big a part of our economy as it used to be, but it's a huge part of our heritage, and it's still an important part of the economy. So this concept of a potential, and the city's really just starting to talk about this openly and ask the General Assembly for money, and we didn't get it this year, but maybe we will in a future year, of combining some interests into a seafood center or a seafood institute downtown.
Right, that's another part of the downtown waterfront is Virginia Tech currently has a research facility on South King Street, and it's a small facility, too small for their needs, and there's a proposal to revamp that, also include a visitor center, perhaps a seafood restaurant, and that is included in the proposal.
Yeah, and Amory's and/or other seafood entities down there, and let people see,
showcase it, allow visitors
in.
to come in, understand what it is that's occurring there. And then probably remember that there was a Hampton First, another group that had a proposal going forward. So we tried to incorporate some of their suggestions and recommendations, such as an urban beach in the Carousel
I love that
area
idea,
to activate the space and to bring more people to the area. And Hampton First also really focused on these same three areas that we're discussing today, and wanted to really activate King Street, Kingsway, as it's the historic core of downtown.
And I think that'll tie together some of our attractions too. So for tourists, you would have the Seafood Institute, you'd have the Air and Space, you've got the Hampton History Museum, sort of pulling people from the waterfront into the core of town and into the restaurant row and where other things are. So that hopefully will make a big difference. And people need to understand these are long-term plans.
Yes.
And ideas and concepts, and that they do change because they rely on private developers to believe there's a market here and to what that market would be, and things change over time from, single-family housing to multifamily. I mean, what people are buying, what is reality, has to influence what happens.
Yeah, I'd say it's a partnership. It's important to understand there are things we can do and things that do rely on the private sector.
So housing, how important is it to get housing downtown? Like, a lot of people say a grocery store should be the city's #1 priority. People who live down there are frustrated. They've been saying this for a long time. Why don't we have a grocery store now?
It is a popular question. So we do market studies when we update plans. When we do plans, when we update plans, we do market studies. We like them to be as based in reality as possible. The market study for this update found that there are about 1,100 residential units currently, and to make it feel like more of a city, a real urban area, you need around 5,000 residential units. So we've got a little bit of a ways to go to really meet that threshold. So when you start getting somewhere more like that 5,000, that's when you can support a grocery store, and when that's when grocers would be more interested in locating a grocery store. The Economic Development Department has worked with many
It's not that we're not
and
trying,
retailers.
but they're not going to come
trying,
where they
but
can't make money.
Yes, if their numbers don't work, it's going to be very hard for us.
Yeah,
to
even with the
locate
city
someone down there.
subsidy, I don't, we're not seeing a lot of potential there. So
that is
it's-
why there's an emphasis in the plan on
residents.
building more residences downtown.
Now, so that's like times 4 of what we have. And so clearly there's not that much land. So we're envisioning a building up. We're envisioning.
Yes, there are some places looking at building up. In some cases, that means quite a few stories, but in some cases, building up is 3 or 4 stories. We're not necessarily looking at 20-story towers all over downtown.
So Allison, if people are interested in this plan, they can go online and look at the PowerPoint that you've been doing for various civic groups and city agencies. How can they, I know it's a little late in the game, they've all been invited to participate so far, but sometimes people wake up when things get to that final stage. How can they still have input or comment?
Everyone is invited to Planning Commission. They can also reach me at alexander@hampton.gov.
Oh, thank you. That's very nice. And yes, Planning Commission will do this in a public hearing format. City Council will also hear it. I mean, there are still opportunities now that it has coalesced for people to speak out, to see it, to ask questions. Because if you just don't hear the presentation that you do, but are looking through the slides, you do end up with some questions like, holy cow, there's a lot of residential in all the city parking lots here. Where are we going to park? And little stuff like that.
And yes, the slide you're talking about, those are identified as opportunity sites. It may not necessarily be that that's a recommendation for every
or that everything
one
happens.
of those are opportunities.
Clearly,
Pick and choose from.
Hampton's not going to grow by 5,000 people downtown all at once.
No, the market could not support that.
Right. So this is, kind of where things could go.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add before we close?
I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you so much for explaining all this. And thank you for watching. You can find more at hampton.gov. And we'll put out notices on when and where those public meetings are so you can attend if you want to. But it's just a lot of fun to page through the presentation and see some of the ideas and how they've coalesced into a plan for our downtown. Thanks for watching.